Hola, amiga, and welcome back to the Latina Leadership Podcast, the podcast for Latinas by Latinas, where every week we have real conversations about the issues and topics that matter most to our community. Topics like education, health and wellness, entrepreneurship, pay equity, and so much more. Get comfortable. We're bringing you another inspiring episode starting right now. Enjoy the show.
Hola, and welcome to another episode of the Latina Leadership Podcast. On today's episode, I have Ana. Ana, everybody has the opportunity to introduce themselves. Who are you and what do you do?
Yeah. Wow. So first off, it's really wonderful being here. Thanks for taking the time to set some quality, introspective chat with both of us. So my name is Ana Arriola-Kanada. I like to say that I'm a results-driven executive, product designer, researcher, and engineering craftswoman. I have experience in 0 to 1 and 1 to many scale innovation, spanning global strategic development for both consumer, enterprise, and most recently AI machine learning within organizations at Microsoft, Apple, Meta, PlayStation, Sony, Adobe, Samsung, and notoriously Theranos. Most recently, I was at IDEO, IDEO Tokyo in particular. I've been very grateful. I've been the recipient of quite a few significant product experiences and awards over the course of my career. Good, IF, ISA, Red Dot, Cool Hunting, and Tokyo Type Directors Club. In my spare time, I love to give back to future generations. I'm a mentor, and most of all, I'm a sponsor for some individuals, and an adjunct professor at UC Berkeley's Sustrata Center for Entrepreneurship and Technology, also known as SCET, and CalArts Graduate School of Arts. I'm a queer Latina. I'm a women's rights and LGBTQIA plus evangelist and spokeswoman. I'm a mother of 4. My youngest is 2 years old, spanning 22 years to 2 years old. Yeah, like I live life on a hard mode, unfortunately.
Mentor to that is a very I'm not even surprised because I have a friend who saw her son off to college and of course is now having another, and I was like that we're in that weird age where we're either becoming mothers or grandmothers, and I was like, okay, this is new. This is new for me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Not a grandmother yet, but maybe maybe in the next decade.
Yeah. Same. That's what I was telling my son. I was like, kid, just finish school, please.
Exactly. Yeah. My 2 oldest are in college. My middle now is in high school. And then I'm having to relearn everything again on hard mode because being a mother in Japan now, like getting your kid into preschool and what that's all about and learning the education system here, it's like, wow, I've gone back to school myself. So yeah.
I know you just mentioned it, but a hard stop for that one, right? It's like, okay, you're in Japan. How did you end up in Japan? Only some of us can dream of what Japan looks like. And you're there.
Yeah.
We had a preempt conversation. You were talking about that you've been back and forth for the last 20 years.
35 years.
35 years. That's right.
35 years. Yeah.
How did you end up there? How does that even come about? I mean, the only thing I can think of, right, is like Sony must have taken you there or something.
No. It even started way before then. So I think it goes back to me and my Latina roots, essentially. It's like, so I was born in Hollywood, California. I was raised in North Hollywood, California. And my parents, I'm second generation immigrant in America. My parents came into the United States undocumented all the way back in the 1930s. And my grandfather and grandmother came through essentially Sinaloa and Chihuahua into Arizona and then found their way to Los Angeles. And it's Los Angeles being born and raised in LA is actually what drove me to Japan before Japan was even popular. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
now our kids and most of our friends are all into like
Yeah.
anime on Netflix or
Yeah.
like manga. It's like when I got into this, let's just say I was a further outcast, like minority on the fringes of like, why do you read that? You can't even read it. Thing when
Uh-huh.
I was in high school,
Mm-hmm.
and I really owe a huge thank you to a former good friend of mine who basically babysat me. My parents were entrepreneurs. Being immigrants themselves, they ran a small business in Los Angeles. And I would go over to my friend's house in elementary school. This is like around fourth grade, maybe fourth grade. And his father, so he also was an immigrant. He was a Japanese American immigrant, but he was first generation. His father was first generation, who also came from Japan, and he would work in Little Tokyo in Los Angeles. And so I would go hang out with him, and they would take me down to Little Tokyo, and slowly I would just be immersed in first and foremost the foods. So like, learning, wow, raw egg, like putting raw egg on my rice, hot warm rice, and then eating this thing called sukiyaki or shabu shabu. It's like, this is pretty fascinating, and gradually built up with the foods and then the holidays. And then eventually I got into interest with the pop culture side. But
That you.
that's what really drove me to Japan. And unfortunately, it took its toll on my own Spanish learning.
Mm-hmm.
So like I wanted to learn Japanese early on instead of Spanish, and my parents were very much against that.
Mm-hmm.
So much, and I would say it wasn't just like my parents were against it. They wanted me obviously to learn Spanish and sort of bring that heritage into my life. And I regret, and now I'm starting to double down with my wife. So we're starting to reinvest in that. But because at that time in Los Angeles, like linguistically within public school system, Japanese wasn't even available. Now I understand that it is quite available, but like it was like French and German and Latin. So I ended up going to community college at night while I was at high school, where I really started getting. I went to basically Cal State University Northridge at night to take private Japanese classes while I was in public high school to get my graduation credit. Of which I graduated high school too early because I skipped a grade in elementary school. And so what drove me to Japan was there was a recession happening in California,
Mm-hmm.
and I was working in the animation industry at that time. I was a storyboard intern on The Simpsons at a studio called Film Roman. That's still there and still working on The Simpsons.
Uh-huh.
But this was like seasons 3 and 4. I'm dating myself here.
Oh my
So
goodness.
quite I
Yeah.
don't even know what season they're on these days, but it's a lot. Check Disney Plus for that. Like when I realized that the animation industry really, it was fun, but I wanted to go do something different. I really wanted to double down on my Japanese. I just decided to move to Japan.
Mm-hmm.
So fortunately, I did not land in Tokyo originally or Osaka, which would have been a larger foreign community, and you would have been able to speak English, and you would not have had to have, again, living life on hard mode, the
Mm-hmm.
forced daily repetition of learning Japanese. So I went to the Japan seaside city of the prefecture is Ishikawa Ken.
Ishikawa.
And the city is Kanazawa. It's the sister city of Kyoto. Well, there's some historical rivalry between the two cities. They're both like craftspeople
Mm-hmm.
centered, culinary centered cities. But because it's in that time, it's pretty rural. Like the Shinkansen, the bullet train, didn't even go out to Kanazawa. Now it does.
Mm-hmm.
But I was one of 6 foreigners there, along with my friend from high school. And it really forced me to, one, really learn how to take on that lifestyle of hustle. Like basically, I got to find my own food. I got to find my own work, just like my parents taught me growing up as a small business kid.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's how I ended up landing in Japan and really forced learning myself with survival Japanese that I had from college,
Uh-huh.
which was like, how much is this? Where's the bathroom? Basic stuff to like, okay,
Yeah.
I need to be able to converse and open a bank account and get things going. Yeah.
Get things. Yeah, it sounds like it's a little difficult. Japan is definitely very much difficult to like live as a foreigner in, and that I've heard from several people. But after 35 years, I think you've got it down quite well. I mean, not only that, but you're probably teaching other Japanese people how to live life there in Japan yourself. But so there's a person that I watch, that I keep up with, that lives in Niigata, and so I just started doing all these research on Japan. So when you start like naming these places, I'm like, oh yeah, that there's a
Yeah.
prefecture, and that's right, and this, and
Yep.
Tokyo is not as where we think it is, and there's actually islands in Japan, and people go vacation there, yeah, and it gets hot, and so I mean, so when I hear you talk about it, because I would have never guessed. Japan is the only thing that I can reflect back on is like books and what happened with the atomic bomb. And that's just, or Tokyo, like pictures, what all these lights. And that's the entire, universe of, they went from, back then to like lights, and there's so much more to
Yeah.
but to hear you excitedly talk about your experience there, like just gives it much more of a real like space in my mind. You know what
You
I
know
mean?
what's really far out is, well, it was hard at first because, like, coming from Los Angeles, where being Los Angelino and like having grown up with like home cooking, like I pride myself on my menudo that I make, and I love to do a lot of cooking. And you get here and there's nothing. There was like really crappy Ortega taco shells, maybe Rosarita refried frijoles in a can.
Yeah.
But now,
Yeah.
now there are farms, there are Mexican farmers that are growing 12 different variants of corn to make masa, and like every type of chile you can think of, and homemade tortillas. And even there are restaurants that are opening up here in Tokyo that are ex-Pajul chefs from Mexico City that now are doing their own twist on taking the best of Latin America and high haute couture cuisine and rifting it on Japanese local bounty. Essentially, it's pretty far out. And I think now, if you were to move here or other people were to move here, other Latinas, like you'd have a really nice life, actually, because like all of us kind of like struggled, and we have all this stuff available now.
It sounds Japan sounds amazing from afar. And I'll say that with kindness. It sounds very nice from afar. Perhaps someday, maybe. Pero ahorita, like I'm just trying to get back to Mexico. I'm just trying to visit there again.
Yeah.
So um as and I want to talk to you about, so you get there, right, and you're in Japan, the pathway. As I'm reading your bio, you go back and forth to California. What takes you back to California outside of your family?
So essentially, when I landed here, so this is pre-digital border control. So like
Mhm.
now everything, passports are digitized, and there's a digital, essentially, breadcrumb of where we are at any given moment that countries can track. When I initially came here, it was all rubber stamp, and I was here illegally. I'll be very straightforward with you. I lived here
Okay.
for a decade illegally, back and forth. And so like then, well, actually it's still the case now. Every 90 days, essentially, you're moving between the availability as a US citizen or a passport holder that has a trade agreement with Japan. You can stay here for 90 days, but then you have to leave. And back then it was the same, and I would go back and forth. But eventually I ended up fully repatriating here and being an immigrant. And um, but over the course of those 35 years, it was really having my extended chosen friends and families here, being able to like
Mm.
continue to work on my own career, my craft. And when I migrated myself into high tech Silicon Valley work, working at companies such as Macromedia and Adobe, with Apple, with obviously with Sony. There's a lot of work here. Headquarters are here, and moving back and forth, and so that's why I was back and forth for quite a bit. But even when I started my own hardware startups, I had a tie to Japan. So both of them we were doing manufacturing in either Taiwan, or we were using technologies and chips from Japan for a lot of the advanced hardware. And there's pictures of that hardware that's up on my LinkedIn profile if anyone wants to see what the devices look like. And I've included some nice imagery for all of you as well to pepper throughout the podcast stuff. But um now, being an entrepreneur, now what I'm working on is addressing the need for something that I myself have not had access to. I'm
Mhm.
a plus size woman,
Mhm.
and finding plus size beautiful clothing that fits me well is not an easy task,
Yep.
like anywhere in the world.
Mhm.
And because these last 7 years I've been having to bespoke and make my own clothing with my friends here in Japan, we started a new business where we're going to be launching next year. Very beautiful, designed in Japan, crafted in Japan, manufactured in Japan, but with love to the rest of the world, plus size clothing. And so we're going to start small, but that just continues, allows me to be inspired and take my experiences from Japan and my beautiful networking community here and share it throughout Europe and North America. So more about that a
Yeah.
little bit later. Yeah.
I heard that a lot of the fabric in Japan is gorgeous and beautiful. So I'm excited to see what it is that you put out into the world.
So for the listeners and the watchers of this podcast, I included a video that we just shot last week of one of the factories where we'll be making our own original fabrics. And you'll see the really intensive, detailed process that the Japanese craftspeople use, where you have thousands of threads coming in and all being stitched together with like quite literally hundreds of years of cultural craftspersonship to create these fabrics that we'll be exploring and playing of how they drape in our new line that will be coming out fall winter of 2025.
Oh my goodness. I'm excited for you, and I'm excited to see some of those pieces because I'm one to be known to just offhand buy things that I hope they fit. And sometimes you're disappointed, sometimes you're not. And when you speak of that plus size, I'm like, yeah, you know what? I think you know the struggle because you got people like designing for plus size, and you're like, my arms are not that small.
Every human is different, and that's the unique approach we're taking to this. So I'm taking my decades of product design and research from products and services, and I'm working with one of my partners. It's a joint venture, who's a human biomechanics expert, a PhD, where we're basically making sure that we can adjust to all the body sizes, and we're specifically focusing in on bodies, natural bodies that are size what we call 1 through 6, but are basically 1x through 6x.
Okay.
And for 5x and 6x, we're actually going to do custom fitting and sizing for that, because we want to make sure that it truly, everything fits perfectly. But we're spending a lot. We're just like when we worked on the iPhone or when I worked on PlayStation, we're sweating the details. We're like making sure that we're inclusive with body shapes, that they're Western body shapes, because as you know, there's different sizes around the world. And once we get stuff ready, I'll be able to share more designs with you. But yeah, thank you for also acknowledging there's a huge need for this, because there really is.
There really, really, truly is. I'm interested to see what engineers produce in clothing. So I'm excited to see what you guys actually can put together for us out here, the plus size community. Because I'm tired of being able to fit my arms into that plus size 1X, and I'm like, that doesn't fit. And so I end up having to tailor my own things and making holes and I'm like, this is so dumb. Like, what is the point of buying clothes if I just have to it makes no sense. Makes no sense. So what I do want to do is I want to get back to a little bit of that conversation you talked about, that you like to be a mentor now. And as I hear your story and I hear the pathway that you took, what do you say to young women who aspire, and I don't know necessarily that pathway, but what you've been able to accomplish? Where do they start?
So, like, it is hard. It's, I think Andreessen Horowitz said it best with Ben Horowitz's book, The Hard Things About Hard Things. As an entrepreneur, you really have to be willing to take risk. And it's calculated risk, I believe, when you want to go off in this endeavor. Now more than ever, with our communities and the ability to reach people around the world and bring our ideas to life, it just really takes the ability to be and feel and tell yourself it's going to be okay. Like, I'm going to take this risk. It's going to be calculated, obviously. And I like to use the analogy of a squirrel suit. Like, have you seen those suits that people put on, and it's got, like, when you spread your arms out, you've got like kind of like wings, like you jump off the cliff and you know that there's going to be an updraft, and that updraft will basically keep you going. And part of that is being a mentor to other entrepreneurs, especially women and other, QBIPOC individuals that are part of that community. But I want to say that more than being a mentor, I really love being a sponsor. Okay. And that there's a difference between mentorship and sponsorship. And for me, mentorship is like spending some time meeting with a few people, but like, it's a very low touch. And having grown up in Japan, where like radical hospitality, very high touch white glove service, what we call a motenashi here, like the thought of unthoughtful, just gratitude and giving, even with the aspect of giving and not expecting anything in return, that sort of karma paying it forward. That's where sponsorship comes into play. And what I believe in sponsorship is making sure that the people that I do double down on and I work with, that I'm always a resource for them. They can always call me at any time and discuss anything with me, and we can dive into the problems and details that they're facing and work through these endeavors. And that's why I love working with university students and other young entrepreneurs. And I'm always there and available to have chats with people. People reach out to me on LinkedIn. They hit me up on social. Hey, I'd love to talk with you about X, Y, and Z. And if it's sincere, I'll reach back. And a lot of the times when I do reach back, they're pretty surprised that I do. And so that's how I look at mentorship versus sponsorship.
If how can you navigate when you see talents? Because there's some people that do have that drive and they do want to start somewhere, but that sometimes, unfortunately, they have to start at a different point in their life to be able to get where they're going. How do you, Anna, spot talent? Because there are times in my career that I've spotted talent and I'm like, oh, they're beyond prepared than what they know they are.
I think it's one, if you're passionate about what you do, you are convicted in believing that your idea, your opportunity is really ripe and ready to be really sort of doubled down on. Mm-hmm. That you can tell by just having casual conversations with people. And if they're really know the details, know the data about what it is that they're talking about, whether it's market information, whether it's community-based information, needs-based information, especially unmet needs, essentially, of populations that they may be thinking about services or products. That's where you've got that initial foundation of personal drive and understanding and uncovering of knowledge yourself. Let's help you take that to the next level through a series of conversations and books that I might prescribe and recommend for them to lead. For me, and I talk about this all the time, and you'll hear this in other podcasts that I've spoken at, but for me, it turns out that my life sort of map of how I've jumped from one experience, one company to another, had a methodology. And it wasn't until probably about 15 years ago that I realized this methodology is known and there's a book about it. And now I just tell people to read this book. And the book is called Designing Your Life. Okay. There's two versions. There's a professional version that came out during COVID, but you want to get the teal color, robin's blue eggshell cover version of the book. And the book itself started off as a class at Stanford. So Stanford had realized that undergraduate students were graduating and they were unhappy with what professions that they were falling into. So they were coming to graduate school to sort of refocus and sort of set their North Star and understand what they really wanted to do in life or what they really wanted to study. And this book takes you through a series of setting your own 5-10 year roadmap, understanding when you think, oh, I really want to do that, or that's just too hard, or that's a problem I can't fix or can't create for. And it teaches you this fundamental key thinking. Is that opportunity or problem? I consider all problems opportunities, by the way. Is it truly a gravity problem? Meaning humans and our Mother Earth, we can't fight gravity. We jump up. We're not going to fly or float. Okay. However, you can use science and knowledge and grit and tenacity to moonshot, right? To moonshot out of that gravity problem. And so it gives you this knowledge of okay, this is truly something that's just fundamentally impossible or impractical. I'm going to pivot and go work on something else then. But the book is really a fantastic read. And I had all my kids read it. I have everyone I work with read it. Yeah, so highly encourage.
More time.
Designing Your Life.
Designing Your Life. Do you know the name of the author by chance?
It is Bill something, or give me 1 second.
No worries. Design Your Own Life.
By Bill Burnett and Dave Evans.
Okay. Design Your Life. Oh, I like that. Lately I've been having a lot of interviewees give recommendations for books, and I was like, this is on point because task. I like a task list. It's okay, I heard the interview. Now what? This is your now what? Go grab the book.
I've got a few more other really good books. I came prepared, kind of what I'm reading now. So that's a book that you must, there's a soft cover and a hardcover. I recommend anyone that's interested in getting the book, spend a couple extra bucks to get the hardcover, because what I use this as is an 18 to 24-month checkup. So you pull the hardcover off your bookshelf again, you really read it or listen to the audiobook version. The author's voice is really fantastic. I do both. I listen to the audiobook and I have the book. And I just go through it every 18 to 24 months. It's kind of like a soulful checkup for myself. Like, are my goals still in trajectory? Am I still heading towards the right sort of route that I want to go in life, or am I diverging and I need to get back on the right path again? So that's why I encourage the hardcover book. But I came prepared today to talk about some of the other books that I'm reading that I think might be interesting for some of your listeners or viewers.
These two more, absolutely.
So let's see here. One of the books that I just picked up, I haven't really cracked it open yet. I'm going to do that this holiday season. Is called Unreasonable Hospitality by Will Guidara. And the reason why I picked this book up, I talked about that term called omotenashi, that sort of ruthless hospitality experience when you come here to Japan, how they wrap things, how you're treated in a restaurant or a hotel. And this book kind of dives into thinking about how Western societies should, both based on learnings from Japan, but also European service industry, can go beyond what is considered a Western norm for customer service, and how that can transform an ordinary experience into something that's incredibly memorable, that's meaningful, and connects us with a product or service that any one of us could be creating. And so that's called Unreasonable Hospitality.
Okay.
And the other book I would also recommend is for those that are self-teaching themselves or may have gone to business school. Everyone knows Malcolm Gladwell. He has a new book out called The Revenge of the Tipping Point. So his original book was called The Tipping Point. The new book is called Revenge of the Tipping Point. And in this book, Malcolm really looks hard in recent, especially with the most recent election. He re-examines his earlier ideas about societal epidemics, and now highlighting subtle shifts that could spark new innovation, but also looking at what other current contemporary negative or changes in our society might have. And this book will help you explore how us as individuals can learn from these specific contexts, so that we hopefully can create good in the world, and move away from fuel that may create harmful trends, shedding light on the forces behind, especially social and sort of these now ulterior vehicles or venues of how people are getting their information today. So that's my heavy business reading book for this holiday season, is Revenge of the Tipping Point.
Revenge of the Tipping. And you haven't read the book yet, right?
Malcolm Gladwell. These two, no, I just picked them up. They're on my shelf to read. Yeah.
Okay. Because that sounds.
They're part of the New York Times bestseller list already. So yeah.
Okay, it sounds like something I need to pick up, that last one, because that's my social change needs to change again based on what happened a little over 48 hours ago. I need to be able to, I recognize that I'm so unprepared. So speaking of which, preparedness, right?
Yeah.
Speaking of which, preparedness, how do you, and this is completely off topic, but on key, how do you prepare yourself for such disappointment, especially someone, and this is speak all sincerity, from someone like yourself who has accomplished so much. I don't know if maybe disappointment for you doesn't look like the same for me, but we've all experienced disappointments. At least some of us have experienced disappointment within the last 48 hours. How do you kind of deal with that on a personal level when it comes to like either your personal career or your personal work or your personal XYZ insert?
Yeah. So I'll give you two examples of how I approach these situations. And one is going to be personal and sort of career and family objective oriented, and the other route is going to be, how am I dealing with the grief in the morning of how we're going to have to meet in the middle and rebuild our country of America, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so the first one is, when you're doing your planning and your thinking, you should always, I like to say, well, there's a term called essentially war game theory or game theory, where everything you think about that you think you're going to approach or do, you need to think about what is the calculus of what can go wrong and what can go good. Essentially, how are you going to steward those possible futures? Because, until it happens, you don't know which future it's going to be. And so while you want to get to a benevolent future of something you may be creating or doing from a personal or professional perspective or from a family perspective, you should also do the homework to go a little bit, I wouldn't use the word dark, but like think about all the malevolent possibilities, the bad possibilities that could happen. So you're prepared and you can think through, if this happens, then I need to do X, Y, or Z.
Mm-hmm.
And I think from using that same perspective, where you could sit with the information that you have and think about and find the positive things that may be happening in one's life. And I'll now equate this to what's happening with post-election, is thinking about, okay, like Kamala talked about, rolling up our sleeves, we got work to do. And now I'm thinking about, okay, for the next 4 years, we need to, in what we do in business and what we do in our community, find ways to meet in the middle and try to continue to make progress and not allow things to go backwards, and understand that there are only certain things that we as a citizen can do, both as a citizen of whatever country you may be listening or viewing this from right now in this podcast, or a citizen of the world, right? We all have a voice and we all can be positively disruptive in any possible way that we feel we're willing to basically put our skin in the game and really push hard on. And I think us as Latinas and Latines, it's like we are passionate group of people. We are family and community based, and nothing is thicker than our blood. And I think that is a superpower that we need to think about, both in dealing with grief and moving forward, but also in like building and creating entrepreneurial enterprise thoughts, projects, and endeavors. So that's how I balance that, doing the calculus of both good and bad, malevolent and benevolent.
Mm-hmm.
The bad things being malevolent, the good things being benevolent. So yeah.
As I hear you talk, I can't help to think like what personally, one, I want to say this, that people always tell you not to mix personal with professional, and I call BS, because at this point it's personal. And
Mm-hmm.
we were talking, I couldn't help to think with the conversations that my husband has had with me, and we've had the discussion about representation always. And he's like, I don't understand it. I don't get it, Anjelica. Like, if you want to do the thing, do the thing. Why do you need to see somebody else? Like, I don't think you're grasping it. And I remember having a huge fallout between me and him, like on a freeway, and we're talking, and we were like mile 10. And I'm like, I can't believe we're still arguing about the same thing. But this time around, he's like, I don't get it. She was qualified. I don't understand. I don't get it. And as we're still talking about it, he's like, misogyny had a big thing to do with this. Huge.
He said it. He acknowledged it. Misogyny and the patriarchy is heavily ingrained into, unfortunately, the social and domestic, the democratic experiment of what America is today.
Yeah.
We've got a lot of work, and unfortunately, I think it's going to fall on our children to continue that work going forward. I don't think we will make progress in our generation, but it's going to be the alpha generation that's really going to be there. I think that's going to change how we see the construct of what people consider to be a family union.
Mm-hmm.
People what consider to be what a community looks like and should feel like, and where harmony and people get along. It's like what Tim Walz was saying, regardless of, your neighbor and your neighbor's thoughts, like that's theirs and yours is yours. And like, we're all here to get along and help one another in society.
I like it. I love what you said, how to be a disruptor in a positive way. Yeah. Yeah. I just, yeah. So I reshift, refocus, restart. I mean, how many tries did they not get to try to, like, everybody gets the opportunity to mess it up a couple of times before they get it right. You know what I mean? And so
Yeah.
I'm allowing myself the same like compassion and the same grace of like, okay, who did I not speak to in the way that I probably should have? So I'm going to try it again. I'm going to try it again. I'm going to try it again. And
Same
so,
here. Yeah.
yeah, thank you. Thank you. So as you're leading your life, I want to know, what legacy do you want to leave behind, not only for the public and the community at large, but also your children?
I think first and foremost, as my family, I want, because they're going to be intergenerational. So I've got some Gen Z and I've got an Alpha, and I want to make sure that they know that you can go to school or you can self-study, and it's all going to be okay in life. I'm an autodidact. I'm self-taught. I didn't have the means or the access or the money to go to college. I had to do it all myself. But hey, I have two kids that are in college right now. One is in med school at NYU. And the other one probably is heading towards more of a physics type background. And who knows where my littlest one will be. But I believe that in the near future, self-teaching, self-learning, being a radical autodidact with edX online, and now with the advent of generational AI as a self-study tutor slash entrepreneur partner slash, go to market across the world, friend. I think I'm excited to see where all this ends up going. It's not a scary thing. And so that, from a personal perspective, that's my hope for my own family and my own children. From a community perspective, I mean, something that I wanted to do and I started doing with the most recent consulting endeavor here, which was try to make Japan a better place for first generation immigrants like myself, making it easier to onboard within the country. That's going to take a lot of work. Like, still, queer marriage is not represented here. And so my wife and I are seen as two separate individuals that happen to have a child. And it's a fight because I don't have a spousal visa. I've got to keep hustling as an entrepreneur and find my own visa ways to stay in this country. And we just had a dinner about queer marriage from a societal perspective a couple nights ago at the Tokyo American Club here, where we had the ambassador from the United States and we had a couple Japan Parliamentary Diet members come and talk about the hope is by 2026 that Japan will catch up with the rest of the world and society will be able to see us as equals and be able to provide us a spousal visa. So that's my hope for the community, just keeping that visibility, that families come in all different shades and colors and shapes of the rainbow, and making sure that, like you said, representation is seen, representation is heard, and ideally representation can sponsor other people so that they don't feel they have to go it alone. That's my hope.
Mm. It just made my heart bounce a little. I was like, oh, that's amazing. That truly, really, really, truly is amazing. What advice would you give? And this is my second to last question. What advice would you give to the audience in terms of like your professional experience? In terms of what advice would you give? If you could leave them with just one thing to look forward to, or, outside of looking you up on LinkedIn, what would you tell them?
From a professional perspective, do some work and figure out what your individual leadership style is. And there's lots of different styles that we have, so that when you can acknowledge, one, what type of leader inspires you, and you as even if you're an entrepreneur of one, you're still a leader. Like, what is your leadership style? And you can figure this out by doing a search using ChatGPT to look up leadership styles, or going to the Harvard Business Review and look up leadership styles. My own personal leadership style is servant leadership style. And I think that knowing your leadership style will really help you both professionally and profoundly personally, as you figure out how to grow and what your 5-year, 10-year personal roadmap is going to be.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
So read the books and look at your leadership style. I like it. I love it. I love it. So before I do let you go, because I definitely know you have a life. Otherwise, we could stay on here forever, because I love your backstory and I have all the questions and I want to talk about Japan and everything else, but I can't. I won't. I promise you I won't. It's the question I ask everybody who comes on here. Do you consider yourself a leader? Why or why not?
I consider myself somebody who's passionate and cares about others. People fall into leadership.
Mhm.
I rather would be an amazing collaborator, partner with a group of people than saying I'm a leader of people. If I
Okay.
need to lead, I can lead. And that's why having and knowing my own leadership style is very important. Um, one of the things we would say at Microsoft is not everyone should be a leader,
Okay.
right? People that are truly beautiful humans and deeply care about what's going on in someone's life inside of their home and their family, because that affects profoundly what happens professionally. And historically, when you think back to like our parents' generation of what a manager or a leader was like, they didn't care about that. They cared
Mhm.
about power and dominance, and it's the
Seniority.
opposite
Yep.
that we need to have. Yeah. So that is what I would say.
I like that. Ana, thank you so, so much for coming on here and giving us a beautiful conversation. Where can we find you?
I'm on Instagram. I'll be becoming a lot more visible on Threads. And even though my Instagram account right now is private, if you're a listener or viewer of this, go ahead and connect and send me a little note. And yeah, there'll be a lot more coming to light about our joint venture between Yes and Divka soon. One other thing I do want to mention, we're going to be setting up a conference. We're bringing a conference to Japan for the very first time next year
Okay.
called Semi-Permanent. If your viewers and listeners go to semipermanent.com, you can get a sense of the conference. It's one of the world's largest creative, professional, inspirational gatherings that happens usually once a year. We're bringing it to Japan for the first time. And that'll give you a little bit of a sense of kind of like one of the other projects that we're working on. But yeah, you could find me on LinkedIn. You could
Mhm.
find me predominantly on Instagram and
Yeah.
Threads.
We'll make sure
I
to add
haven't.
all of it.
Yeah, no, I'll be sure to make sure you'll have all the links and everything. And then more on the fashion line in the first quarter of next year. Yeah, we don't want to give the name away just
Okay.
yet.
I was gonna
Yeah,
ask the name. Okay,
you'll
no.
get hints if you follow me on Instagram. You're gonna see like I'm doing stories. And I've got some really fun stories that I'm posting. And if you follow the through line of the threads that I'm leaving, the little breadcrumbs, you're gonna get a sense of what's up.
Okay. Okay. I won't press. So I get it. I get it. I get it. I get it. Sometimes we have to hold it close for us to be, keep people on their toes. But
Absolutely.
thank you so, so much for coming on here. Again, greetings from America to Japan. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for joining us on the Latina Leadership Podcast. If you enjoyed today's episode, be sure to like, subscribe, and share it with your amigas, comadres, hermanas, your mom, your tias, or anyone who you think would enjoy the conversation. The Latina Leadership Podcast is a weekly video and audio podcast since 2020. Visit our online Latina Leaders Directory, join our growing community of Latina changemakers, keep up with our calendar of events, or reach out to us if you're interested in supporting the Latina Leadership Podcast by visiting our website at latinaleadershippodcast.com. And with that, we'll see you next time.